Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Wilton Library this cold and chilly morning, but thank you for being here. I'm Andrea Sato. I work on adult programs here at the library. And we're very pleased to have another SPED NET program this morning. I won't tell you a lot about it because Carol Kennedy will introduce our speaker. I did want to tell you about a big event that we have coming up on Monday night. It's called Crystal Knocked Commemoration at 7 p.m. The Connecticut organization Voices of Hope is presenting a 93-year-old retired educator, Ruth Weiner, who will speak about the night of broken glass in her Vienna birthplace when the Nazis pretty much threw the Jews out of Austria and came across Europe. And so she is a witness of that event. It's a big deal that she's here with us on Monday night. So if you have teens who might want to learn about it or yourself, please come. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Carol Kennedy, co-founder of SPED NET.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning. In case you didn't notice, there are chair pads in the back. Usually the seats start out comfortable until like 15 minutes in, so you can always get up and get one of those. So thank you for coming. I'm Carol Kennedy, co-founder of SPED NET, and Eve Kessler, who's normally here, is traveling today. We created SPED NET over 27 years ago, really to help each other. And then we thought, well, wow, why don't we just help others too and share the information that we are gathering for our own children? We found that knowledge is a powerful tool in advocating for children, especially when navigating special needs and special education. The PDFs and video from today will be emailed to you in a couple of days. Be sure your name is on both of the sign-in sheets because it will come from the library and also from SPED NET. We also archive the videos and other presentations on our extensive resource library within our website, spednet.org. Today, we welcome Dr. Mary Murphy, a clinical psychologist in private practice in Newtown and on Zoom, who specializes in counseling, executive function, academic coaching, psychological testing, neuropsych therapy, biofeedback. Dr. Murphy is a Yale Fellow and an adjunct professor at WestConn. More can be found about her on her website, drmarymurphyphd.com. We hope you all take away some tidbit from today that is useful. SPED NET is a 501c3. We operate on a very small budget, which goes 100% to programming and a lot to the website support, because Eve and I are total dinosaurs when it comes to that. We do not pay ourselves. Please consider us when making your gift decisions. Every penny does count. A couple of ground rules, the obvious: please silence your cell phones. Be mindful. This is an open forum being recorded, so we cannot guarantee confidentiality. Please do not reveal any private information in your questions. A microphone will be circulated for recording purposes. Questions will be answered at the end, probably around 12, if not a little bit before, to give you ample time to field any issues that you might want to share. Keep in mind, all discussed here is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be legal advice. Lastly, and most importantly, our talk is in partnership with the Wilton Public Schools, Wilton Youth Council, Wilton Library, and the Newtown SPED PTA. Thank you for being here, Mary, and we turn it over to you.
Hello.
This is a weird room to be in. I wanted to share. This was the very last room that I was in before COVID started. Don't worry, nobody's jinxed, but it was a very weird thing because I've been doing our talks online for all these years since COVID started. But this was the room, and we didn't know that like 12 days later, the world was going to shut down. And so it's kind of appropriate that the topic we're talking about today is like the stresses and the anxiety and how actually a lot of our lives have changed. So, because for me, this is like part of my origin story of like where it all started for me. So, so that's what we're talking about today is for the first time, we're talking about not just a parent topic or a topic for our kids, but together and the kind of like the interplay between them and how we can kind of mutually help each other, you know, while we're focused on our kids, that we're helping ourselves as well. So before I talk about the current landscape of like what stress looks like for the kids today, I just wanted to share that it's really, I'm probably going to say the word unprecedented way too many times today, but I think that's what is the main issue, is that we really have so many things that our kids, but also us simultaneously, are going through for the first time alongside them. Because usually, right, like we remember being kids, we remember being teenagers and all the stages that they go through and all the stresses, like we get that, and we kind of be like, okay, I know why they're saying and feeling the way that they are. But ever since things have started to change, you know, with COVID going forward, those were the biggest changes that we were simultaneously going through. And we didn't have a roadmap for it, right? We didn't know what was going to happen next. And so it's similar, I have to say, to what was happening with the treatment providers. Like, you know, being a therapist while all of our clients and us were all going through the same stresses was bizarre, right? Like, usually people come to a therapist and, you know, they bring their kid to us and they're like, you know, they're going through this angst stage and like, I remember how hard this was and can you help them? And now this time it was, can you like help me figure this out too? And the therapist would go home and also be dealing with it. So it's like all like a 360, like everybody involved in the picture has been in this, you know, brand new way dealing with all these different new stresses that we don't really know we didn't know how it was going to turn out, right? So now that we're not like at the height of COVID, I just want to kind of point out some of the major stresses that have been going on for kids, and I promise it's not going to be negative after this. So we're going to talk about like the negative things, but also what can we do about it? So in the landscape, this wasn't really meant to be in a certain order, but so don't read into this, but the first one was, think about the timing of this month. I think that our kids are really, really aware of all the stresses and changes because there's been a lot of adults talking around them and talking about, you know, the effects that it's having on them. It's on the news all the time. Like it's splashed across every website. Like there's always a lot of tensions going on, and kids being aware that adults are at odds with each other, like not getting along, right? Like they're not. And then the kids also are, you know, not really understanding the depth of that. But they're knowing that people, their parents, the adults around them are all stressed out, but not understanding why. And then what's really different for them than probably, like, I never try to guess people's ages, but like I can safely say we did not grow up with cell phones, most of us, right? Like, so we didn't have not just the internet, but we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have like a constant bullying possibility at any moment of the day, right? Like we could go home and you know, not pick up the phone if they called the landline, right? Like we did not have to deal with the fact that it was just all the time, the way they're having it all the time. So this is like a constant pressure that's all around them. And then I can tell you in the last few decades, we haven't had things that really threatened our safety. I remember my parents that they had, get under the desk, right, at school, because it was a bomb drill. What did they call that? We call it a bomb threat today. But like there would be like the alarms, and they'd have to seek shelter, and they would tell them duck under your desks. I don't know what the desk was going to do for you, right? With like a nuclear bomb, right? That was going to be detonated. But that wasn't us. Like, so we have not really had that experience, but we have our kids going to school and having, just in this last 10 years, in our immediate area, knowing that so close to us, we had Sandy Hook happen. And this is something that I'm always so completely aware of. My practice is in that town. And that was not a day. This is 10 years later, just as tense, just as much aftermath, and all the things that are different. Like I heard today that Wilton schools some of the schools are starting to have to take their cell phones from them and put them in the pouches starting this week. And that's making parents react, right? Like, oh my God, I don't have contact. I don't usually call my kid at school, but now I can't call my kid at school. So it breaks the connection and the safety that we feel like we have, that we could just get them at any moment and they could text us if they're in trouble, So we didn't have any of that growing up. And we didn't have the need for thinking about our safety. It was not a constant presence at all. So this is, a bizarre time for kids. And then the kids are still dealing with the pandemic aftermath. So it's not as prevalent where we think about the masks are causing problems and having to do remote schooling anymore. But the aftermath of this is that I can tell you from my practice how many kids were delayed in getting diagnosed with anything, getting treatment for anything that they needed. This is something that it will take us a generation to make up for, because everybody was delayed, not being identified, not getting services, and not helping parents understand, like, this is what they need and what supports they need. So everything being delayed we don't even know the full range of what that's going to be for people. I teach at WestCon in the undergrad and the grad program, but I am seeing kids who went through remote school. They do not know how to study. They're completely different than the cohort before them. The 4 or 5 years before, they came in really well equipped, and it's a totally new baseline. And we have to be really easy and lenient, because there's an understanding that comes along with them that they did not have all of the same training, and they might have huge gaps in being able to study. And so it's not just like the medical or just the mental health, it's the academic stuff. And then that kind of is very relevant to us, because we probably follow SPED NET for a reason, right? we are related to SPED NET because we have a kid, or even multiple kids, that are struggling in some way, either with mental health or learning differences. And so our kids were disproportionately affected by this. They were the ones who were delayed in getting services. And so the aftermath for our particular kids, like, I think of us as like a subpopulation. We're watching our kids have this, continued effect that's continuing now for a while. Because I can't believe it was 4 years ago that it actually all started. It's so bizarre to think of it that far away, but it's such a constant presence still. And so the things that we're seeing happening with our kids and the extra pressures that they have, so look at that together, like in one place, and it's way too much. So when you think about like all these different kind of stressors coming from every different direction, this is why, do you remember, depending on ages, people might remember when the Surgeon General, like, he's like the medical doctor for the whole country. He came out and he said cigarette smoking is bad for you. Like we had to be told that in the 80s. So the Surgeon General does not come out with statements ever. Like the big last one was smoking, okay? And then there was something about social media after COVID. Now it's a little more than 2 years ago, the Surgeon General had to come out with a statement to notify the entire country that our children are in a state of emergency, that there's a mental health crisis for our kids. Again, unprecedented. Like this never happens, but it's finally like risen to the level where it needed to be publicly stated and acknowledge the elephant in the room that our kids are dealing with this. And again, they're not dealing with it in isolation, right? Has anybody seen this book that came out? Like this, like I think it really captures it nicely. That all of the different pressures that we just talked about, this is the end result. You know, we have a very anxious generation of kids that we're living with, trying to help them navigate the world and be successful. And it is really the culture of the times that we have a very anxious community of kids. So because of that, we decided, because this was brought to me, I didn't have this idea originally. It was brought to me that we needed a talk to address what parents are telling us, SPED NET, what you guys are talking about with SPED NET. And the idea was, we can't separate this stuff out. It's both the parents and the kids all simultaneously going through something. And we can't just say, the kids need help. Drop them off at the therapist and say, like, they're going through something. Can you talk to them? Can you help them? It's no longer just that. It's now like a systems issue, like a family issue. It's all of us kind of an issue. So that's why we're talking about this as like a shared experience, that we're going through something at the same time as the kids are. So does that make sense, that we're kind of like intertwined, right? Can't separate us out. I think this is probably the last slide that will look like you're in college class, don't worry. But just to share, so we're talking about the parents' perspective, that they're often experiencing their own set of anxieties about stuff. And what's happening is that inadvertently, that kind of, whatever we're doing, whatever energy we have, that's kind of transmitting, and as well as we think we hide that stuff. Like we try so hard to hide that stuff. And it's still kind of transmitting and seeping out so that the kids are aware that we are stressed. So that's, the parents are noticing. And the kids are kind of in this state of kind of absorbing. It's more like, I don't want to say that we are the cause of that, but I would say that definitely we are, part of the causal link. And then it becomes like a circle where you can't even tell like where it started, where it ends, it just is, we're feeding each other, So the children are having a lot of anxiety reinforced and shown to them everywhere they go. Teachers, I can't tell you how many like we used to not have to think about what teachers were going through either. Like we knew it was a hard job and we were like so grateful for their work, but now we see the drain on their faces and their own mental health struggles and how much it's hard for them to stay above water. So everyone in the system, everywhere kids go and where we're going, everywhere kids go, they're seeing really stressed out adults and a lot of emotion. So there's this shared impact that, that the parents and the kids are all going through that together. So there's probably other influences that I didn't mention. I chose, the ones that are kind of like the top 10 stresses that kids would say and parents would say. But what we want to do is figure out like, what could we do about it? And believe me, I'm not like on a book tour or anything like that. But sometimes it's just easier to remember things like 7 top things we can do for this. So that's why this will be a lot more readable in the slides, don't worry. But there are these like 7 areas that I think are very practical. And I think parents really are looking for something practical. Like, what could I do about all this stuff that's happening around us? and how can I help my kids? So I'm going to tell you these the 7 areas. So the first one is co-regulation. Did anybody ever hear this term before? Yeah, one? Yes? Okay. Any more? It's not so common. Yeah. So usually we hear self-regulation, like we're responsible for us and our emotional regulation, but co-regulation is us alongside our kids. So as we are regulated, they are also it's modeled for them that they are learning to self-regulate, but we're kind of like setting the pace. It's like we're a pace car. How calm we are, how stressed or how much energy that's negative that's coming from us could do harm, right? But the opposite is true, the positive. So we know that if somebody's screaming in the room, we're going to be stressed out. But just as much, if the person next to you is calm, you can actually start to feel calm. So I have this like one little example I just wanted to share with you. I work with kids that are as young as like maybe 8, and they're not very verbal, right? So I can remember a kid that couldn't even make it past the waiting room and was just too scared, didn't want to like walk into the office or anything. And we were lucky enough that we could close the waiting room so people didn't come in. And I just sat with him. Like I literally sat next to him, and he couldn't speak because that's what happens, right? We get paralyzed and we can't speak when we're anxious. And kids also don't have words for how they're feeling. So sitting next to him, all I did was do my own breathing. And he started to kind of literally like unravel, It took a long time, but like it's not magic, but it is the most effective thing when we think that we need to be doing something. The answer actually could be that we just do nothing, but be present next to them in a calming way. And so, when he has like his arms around his legs and he's all like curled up, like almost like a crab, and was stuck in a vice like that, like he didn't need to say he was anxious, right? Like clear that he was anxious, but the unraveling and the stress kind of leaving his body, that's what starts to happen. And it always stands out to me because it's one of the biggest examples that I ever had of watching it happen live in action. Because usually I tell people about doing breathing and they go home and they don't do it in front of me that often. But seeing the effect of it, it's incredibly helpful. So we are the people that can co-regulate with them. There's other adults in their life, but they won't be sitting side by side with them in that same way, and they won't be as bonded as we are to our kids. So they feel, that somebody is, kind and attentive, and nobody has to use any words. It just starts to happen. So I always like go back to this. I don't know if it's a meme or what you would call this, but the reason why we do things like breathing and calming kinds of things is because we can't just tell people to calm down. Like, doesn't it aggravate you so much to be told this? I hate it. So that's why I always use this picture. This is exactly the opposite of what we would want to do. But co-regulation is just kind of learn about what that means. So like I mentioned, it's literally like staying in their presence, but you being the pace car of the calming, you just doing breathing that is relaxing, and I'm going to show you an example of that. And so what we can do, because this is more oriented towards what parents can do for kids, we can be really good at doing our own self-regulation. So if we have some way that we can instantly slip into doing this and calm ourselves down quickly, that then will be the intervention for them, literally just being there with them. So the better we are at doing that and like invoking it, getting it like ready to like be able to be done. These are exercises, I'm going to show you is something that people do, and literally within the first 30 seconds, you can see that the body's like stress response is decreasing and getting better. So like I mentioned, just, being a calm presence and supportive. The reason why this works is because of what we learned from trauma research. So if you look at the very bottom, actually before that, let me just say, what's the first thing that we say when somebody's really upset? What? Are you okay? Anything else? What's wrong? What's wrong? We're like, we pummel them with questions. What happened? Are you okay? Did somebody do something? Are you all right? Like, we start asking them a bunch of questions. And actually, your brain is hijacked by emotion and can't really access being able to speak. That has to come later, but we jump right into it like a default, you know? And it is so hard for we're human, you know? So it's very hard to undo that automatic response. But if we do this first step where we are calm, because think about it, when we ask that question, it comes across as we're anxious. Are you okay? What happened? Who do I need to beat up? Somebody just upset my kid, you know? Like, we get upset. So we're clearly not regulated when we ask that question, right? And so if regulation happens first, like being in their presence, when somebody is younger, you might be like opening an app together and doing the breathing exercise so they have something to look at. Anything that involves technology, kids are like instantly into. So you don't have to speak. They don't have to answer questions, you know, just something that helps them get their body under control so their brain is not like completely hijacked. And as you're doing that, you're showing that you have put your phone down, you have stopped what you were doing, and you were relating to them. Like, you care, you showed them that you stopped everything you were doing and literally sat with them. And this is the kind of thing, like, when we approach anybody who's been traumatized or is just anxious or having a panic attack, this is what we do. We want to be calm in their presence, teach them about how to be calm. And even if they don't know how to follow the steps of, you know, because they can't think in the moment, they will feel what you're feeling. So it's powerful because kids don't get this a lot. We're always looking at our phones. I have to say, like, we all are. Like, we're not really like even giving eye contact to kids usually. So the fact that we like take that step of sitting down next to them, and especially when you can do this by like getting on the floor, it is such a like obvious thing that you're there and you're just there for them. That is something they instantly respond to, and it calms them. So sitting there, showing that you care is the relational part. And then it's the reasoning. That's when you can start asking, like, did something happen you want to talk about? What do you think you were thinking about when this all started, when you started to get really upset? Then they're capable of talking and actually make headway, right? Like, 'cause it'll be meaningful. And if they're younger, the younger they are, the less they'll be able to do that reasoning part, because they won't really know, like, I don't know what triggered me, like as an adult, right? We sometimes don't know what triggered us. So it's hard for kids to know and be able to tell us, like, hey, this is what was happening. So this is even though it came from trauma research, like, this is what we want to keep in mind. Not questioning, but trying to be calm in the presence. And well in advance of any kind of emergency situation, we are doing something that I'm going to point out is like teaching them ahead of time how to do some self-regulation with breathing so that they don't have to do anything and remember anything except literally to breathe, which is hard when you're anxious. It's the only thing you could probably accomplish while you're really anxious. So does that make sense? Even though it's trauma research, that is our kids. So when I think about some other concrete things that we could do, I call this like prioritizing feelings. So some of the things that we can do, I sometimes joke that the first one, reflective listening, could save your marriage. It's totally true. So this is not just for kids. Like, if we learn how to not just, when somebody's upset, ask them a million questions and, you know, start to give them advice, you know, that response we always have, like, I just want to fix this problem. If we actually just like say back to them what we heard them say, that's a reflection. That's reflective listening. This is the secret to being a therapist. I have to say, this is exactly all we do. So I could put myself out of business right now if you all just do this. So you could totally do it. And I have on the resource slide all these like resources, like short videos about how to do this. And so there is one for this. Like, what does it look like to do reflective listening? But it helps everybody. It helps in your relationship. That's why I say it saves marriages. It really helps with any person you're trying to relate to, not have an argument with, right? So the reflective listening, people don't argue with you saying what you just heard them say. They'd be arguing with themselves, right? Like, they're not going to disagree. And then when it comes to kids, this is more related to kids, is, offering choices. I always want to point out that kids are often they're not autonomous. Like, they're told what to do every day, every minute of the day, right? Like, they have to go to school, they have to sit, stand. It's like militant, right? Like, they're told when to do this, told when they can go to the bathroom. Like, it's incredible amount of control that they don't have, and others have of them. And that is like almost a traumatizing experience if they don't have enough opportunities to have choices in their life. So is anybody a teacher? So sometimes, like, I've heard teachers talk about like voice and choice, like, so kids to have a voice and have some options, voice and choice. So when kids are little, it could be literally like picking out their outfit, as long as it's the right season. How many kids left the house today in shorts and it's 30 degrees? My kid. So it's very hard. I know, I totally get it. So, but like equally okay options being presented and then letting them get practice with doing things. So, so offering choices whenever you can take away this kind of like feeling of being restricted all the time. And then emotion labeling. This is why people go to therapy later in life, because we usually don't learn emotional vocabulary. We don't learn how to like label what we were feeling. And so a lot of the things that we can do is kind of say, coupled with the reflective listening, like, it sounds like you were feeling really sad when your friend said that, like giving the label of the emotion, because it connects dots for them that they just, as kids and adolescents, they don't know how to connect dots. So, so trying to label it for them is helpful. And then problem solving is something that we don't want to like disable our kids by helping them too much, but helping them be able to like talk through and think through a solution. I always find that kids have a much better solution. Like, they're so creative. As we get older, we're like less creative, right? So kids often have some really good ideas about like how something could be approached. So again, they're like getting their voice and choices and things. And these are really like very basic things that we could fit into our lives, right? It's not like an appointment or like a treatment you have to send them to. It's like it'll be hiding in plain sight within the way you interact with the kids. And it could help, other relationships in your life too. So what happens on, is it your left? Yes, okay. So if you're on the left is what we wanna try to avoid. So if we are kind of like, anxiety accommodation is like, oh, I'm so sorry that bothered you. I'm scared. I know you were scared. Okay, let's just avoid that. You don't have to do that. It's okay, honey. That is when we're giving, so much power to the thing that they're afraid of and agreeing with them, essentially. That's a scary thing. Yeah, we need to avoid that. I'm not going to make you do that. It's okay, honey. And that, when we do that too much, there's times when that's appropriate. But when we do that, when it's too much, that can become like really increasing their anxiety because they're not getting practice and experience to really conquer things. Be exposed to it. And then the other part is saying, this toxic positivity came out around COVID, this phrase. Parents tend to do this a lot. I know I do this myself, where we're like, it's okay, you're fine, you're good. It's like, actually, it might be more effective to acknowledge the elephant in the room is that it's not okay. They are upset. And it's not like you have to be a cheerleader to be like, you're fine, everything's good. The world is fine, even when like everything's on fire around them, right? Like, we have to acknowledge what's real. So on that side of the scale, those are the things we kind of want to avoid. And that, when we always hear like, oh, we want to have kids that have grit, and resilience. And we're like, but how do we do that? I don't know. But avoiding the stuff on the left is how you do it, and letting them have chances to actually build skills, right? Like, you didn't just swoop in and fix it. You didn't swoop in and take care of something and problem solve it and make the problem go away. So that's how they're developing skills. And they become confident and resilient because of that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more later too. But that's what we mean when we're talking about resilience, you know? And then self-care, I am not going to spend too much time. I'm just going to say, like, not preach to the choir. Everybody knows that these are like positive things, but I just want to say that how important it is that they're watching us all the time. Not to make you paranoid, but they're totally watching us all the time. They see how we talk to our spouse, they see how we talk to other adults, and whether we roll our eyes, and they notice everything that we do and we don't do. And they know when we're kind of hypocritical too, you know, like that we don't really do something, but we're asking them to eat a healthy meal. You know, we're like we're eating Haagen-Dazs when they go to bed. You know, like there's a lot of hypocritical stuff we do. So just know it really does go a long way if you're able to walk the walk and let them see you do stuff instead of preaching, because they'll be watching us and then want to kind of do what we're doing. And they'll see like, oh, this is what adults do. I want to be an adult too. I'm going to do that. You know, they would want to be part of it and not like be told that's what you should be doing. You know, then nobody wants to do it. So that's just a point. So I'm actually going to do something out of order on purpose. Okay, because it should land with that second to last thing. What I mentioned earlier about like the politics and the news and everything, I just want to point out that, you know, we probably all lived through 9/11. Right? Like, remember all the news coverage, and like, if we were in this area, there was a ton of news coverage. We couldn't get away from it. It was graphic images. There was so much stuff. And that's the kind of life that our kids are living right now, because they see anything on the internet that's a news story. They walk by if we're watching the news and they're like, oh my God, the world is on fire. Like, and it feels really scary to them because they don't know it's going to be okay. So, like right now, my daughter's school is doing CNN every day. It's like news blips from CNN. I'm like, how did this start? I don't know, but it's interesting that like you get to an age and they start to like, you know, it's part of the world to get used to like, where's your news source? And but it's never good. There's never positive stuff in the news. So we gotta be careful about how much they get it. They can't be in a bubble, you know, but they really, you know, we need to limit that. So this is not meant to be negating what I just said, but the opposite is also true, where we don't want to, like I said, we don't want to put them in a bubble. We can't just say, everything is fine. That's the toxic positivity, right? Like we're not going to say everything's fine. We want them to know that, you know, there are things going on, but the adults have it. We're okay. You know, that's an adult world thing. We're working on that. You don't have to worry about that piece. And telling them an age-appropriate version of it, because they have to know that there's conflict in the world. They have to know that there's going to be problems and reasons why they might not be able to get the cell phone or the game or the something that they want, right? Because there's a whole world and financial realities and things that are their responsibilities. Like, so we want them to be resilient, like be able to just like go with the flow and see that things are hard, but I get through it. And then they're competent and confident to do more things. And that's what we want. We like literally want to put ourselves out of jobs, right? Like we want to be fired maybe at 18, right? When they're 18, we want to be fired, then we're successful, that they don't have to rely on us for so much, right? So that's how they become, again, this like buzzword of resilience. And then as we talk about like how social media could be a problem, technology could be a problem, I want you to think about how, have you ever heard of like M-Health? It's like digital health. They're like usually like positive health apps. You guys probably have some on your phones, right? Like Calm, something like that. These are some examples of like these health apps. I think this is one of the things that kids really would benefit from seeing us doing them, because it's technology, it's a positive way to be using technology, and it's great for us, and it helps us with our self-regulation, and then they want to participate in it. So has anybody used Calm? I like that one. And there's a lot of, the free version of it is really good. And then the one on the right, it's funny, I characterize Insight Timer as a sleep app because I use it as a sleep app, but it's actually for so many other things. Has anybody ever used Insight Timer? Yeah, some. I like have no vested interest in any of these things, but just as examples, I love these things. And I always tell people, like, because it's the best confidence I can kind of communicate about the app, I've never heard the end of the sleep story that I listen to. I've never, literally, it's a 20-minute thing, and I've never heard it. And I joke, I've never heard it. And I'm kind of curious, actually. But so when something is calm and soothing and it becomes like part of your daily practice, that is something that, again, they're going to notice. Or they're going to notice that like you actually were well rested because you were working on something for yourself, and you know, it allowed you to get to sleep and get some rest. So these are for them and for us. You know, I have some ones that I'm going to point out are more for the younger ages. So who has like elementary school kids? And then what about teenagers? Oh, some of you both. It got you coming and going. Okay. Oh, I always think of that as, yeah. Okay. Any other preschool? Like, just, you guys are super proactive. So based on the age, I put in the resource slides, and you could tell by the icons, like the teenager might not want the one that has a picture of a monster, you know, that's like, I'm going to fight anxiety, you know, so you can tell which age groups it's targeted at. But these are ones that are completely appropriate for kids or adults, but they're not meant for kids. So they're not like cutesy. So I want you to think about, I don't want to just say like that slide that was like, nobody calms down when they're told to calm down. I don't want to tell you like, work on your self-regulation. Bye. See you later. I want to give you the tools to be able to do that. And honestly, this happens to be the thing that's always in our pocket. It's always in our hands. So I think of using the apps. My phone is full of these apps. So I'm always checking them and vetting them. And so I talk about the ones that are effective and for the majority of people that I suggest them to. So the one in the middle is the one that I have a whole separate section on that I'm going to go to next. And so I'm going to point out by going backwards to that. So has anybody heard of the word biofeedback? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So it's sort of like this umbrella term, and underneath it is things like neurofeedback. So anybody who has a kid with ADHD has probably heard about neurofeedback because it's one of the possible treatments for it, and it's not medication based. So a lot of people have, you know, come across it at some point. But biofeedback is a lot of different types of stuff. I first was introduced to it working in a neurology practice. So of all the different specialties, I really have like such empathy for people who end up in a neurology practice, because it's often, you know, conditions that people don't know what's going on. They have like migraines of unknown origin or pain of unknown origin. It's called idiopathic. Nobody wants to have anything with idiopathic in the name because it means they literally don't know where it came from. So they don't know why the people have the symptoms that they do. So everybody's dealing with uncertainty, not knowing if it's going to be cured or ever go away. Like, so they're just having to manage stress or pain. And so in that practice, they had an entire psychology department because their patients were all stressed out because of these issues. So I worked with people who had migraines, and so it helped pain control. And it also helped with ADHD, and that's like my specialty in life. I don't know why I love ADHD so much, but I don't have it. But I really have a special like soft spot for people who have ADHD, and it really helped them. And the kind that I was doing was called it's heart rate variability. So it's really just using your pulse instead of have you ever seen neurofeedback? That's the other one that has like the leads on your head. The brain waves are being measured. So the one that is heart rate related is just your pulse. So it's, not very invasive or anything. So biofeedback is a very specific tool, and I've seen it help so many people very young to actually very old because of how easy it is. So I always want to try to get the word out about it because there's no reason why people can't just do it themselves. And so I just want you to know that this is something you could have in your pocket per se, right? So it's technology, and I'll just say, biofeedback, the bio is some biological measure. So it could be your brain waves, or in this case, it's your heart rate, which is your pulse. And the feedback part, the word of feedback, is that the computer's showing you what your stress levels are. So it's measuring your heart rate and your breathing and how your breathing is changing your heart rate. And that, if I don't know if we ever get taught this, but like the heart is, our pulse is like the stressometer of our body. So like as soon as we start getting stressed, our pulse goes up. So that's how it's like our mental health red flag, actually. And thank God we have a lot of Apple Watches because it can like alert us that our pulse is going high. It's stress related. So it's the quickest, easiest way to know, because we're not going to take like a blood level and say, oh, this is how stressed you are today. But knowing somebody's pulse, the technology, whether it's your cell phone or the computer, could just show you what your stress score is and how effective is your breathing to get your stress scores down. So it's so rewarding. I've always been able to do so many different things. Like psychologists can do like so many different kinds of stuff. It's probably perfect for people with ADHD, actually, right? Because you can just like go in all these different directions. But when I've worked, even though I've done so many different things, I think really the most rewarding thing I've ever seen, like a smile on people's faces, whether it's a young or old person, is when they see their stress scores go down. And I've had the little kids like want their little report printed out and like to show their parents, look how good I did. And it's like, wow, like I never would have known of all the things I was ever going to be taught how to do that it would be that helpful and reinforcing for people to know that they could control their own body. And what your physical body's feeling helps your mood. It helps you feel in control. It helps you feel less depressed and less anxious. So it's used for ADHD because it helps improve focus, because the breathing makes you focus on the target in front of you, and you're getting insight into your body. And like, of all the things that we have talked about that is a stressor that we have no control over, this you do have control over. So you get to see that you could change your body. And so I think that that's part of the reason it's so reinforcing for people, especially kids. It like really tunes into like their sense of not having control over any part of their life. So I think that's helpful. So I think that trying to use an app, and I have some suggestions for different ones. Biofeedback can be done at home. Practice, it can be done between the family. There's even like a cloud on some of them so that you could see each other's scores. And I know that like sometimes it's like not meant to be competition because we're breathing, right? Like we're trying to be calm. But it's cool to get scores and to see like, oh, I'm doing this. I'm doing good with this. And so you could literally have tracking of progress and seeing your families and seeing their scores. So it's not fancy, but it is literally about breathing, and you end up not having to go to an office to do it. You know, there are, I put in the resource slide, some people in our immediate area that do this, who's like kind of known for doing it. And the Psychology Today directory have you ever had to look for a therapist for your kid, right? We all go to psychologytoday.com and there's a little find a therapist directory, and that's how you get it, you know, and has all the filters in the world. One of them is biofeedback. And you click biofeedback in your zip code and it tells you like who's close to you. So you could be introduced to it by a therapist, but literally, like I know from doing it for years in the neurology practice, that I was always telling people, on average, I'm probably going to see you like 3 times. That's it, you know? And the younger they are, it might be 1 session. So it ends up being a very quick way to get, you know, the training for it. But it is an off-the-shelf thing that people could just do themselves. So it's not requiring that you go to therapy or something. But I wanted to show you like what it looks like. So we all watch Grey's Anatomy and like, you know, all these medical shows, right? So this is, it looks like an EKG at the top, but it's not. It's looking at your heart rate variability. So somebody in a training or following the screens that you get with a product, it would show you a screen that looked like this. And this up and down at the top there, just look at the top for now, actually. If you look at the top, you see that it's kind of jagged, right? It's kind of like all over the place. It's not good, right? Like that is somebody who is stressed, and it's actually like called a chaos pattern. It means that they're not taking good, deep breaths that are actually like good and oxygenating and getting stress out of our body. Is actually about getting a really good exhale, you know, getting all the carbon dioxide out of us. So if you see this and this is what you look like in the beginning, you're like, okay, I see my stress score, see the red. So that's what you see. You're just told, you don't have to interpret any of this, but as a user of this, you can just look at the stress score and it's simple. Red is bad, right? Like you don't have to know anything else. So you know that the red score is where you're starting out, and then as you apply the breathing technique, and they give you videos, or you can literally go to YouTube and they'll guide you through different types of breathing. Sometimes it's better to do one type for your body than another, and so you try out different ones. And then as you do your breathing, you are seeing your scores improve right there live in action in front of you. So you get a chance to see if you change your breathing technique slightly, if you close your eyes, like what improves it for you? You are unique. There's like a set of different things that, you know, the programs always suggest to you, like try closing your eyes or think about a positive, joyful moment, something you appreciated, a positive emotion of some kind. There's lots of different ways, but you see how your body reacts. And then like over time, somebody who is doing the training, this is what it's supposed to look like. A really wide up and down, and that means that somebody's taking a nice deep breath. And I always used to, when I would talk to people about this, I would always say that anxious people suck at breathing. Really. We hold our breath and we don't take these long exhales and really kind of get the stress out of us. And then I don't know why it ever took off in like popular media, but everybody's always been told, take a deep breath, right? Like everyone's told to take a deep breath when they're upset or anxious. And it's actually the opposite. I tell people to do it like in a different proportion. They're breathing in for much less time than they breathe out. It's actually double the time that you're breathing out. So you want to expel that stuff and get that out of your body. And that's when you get nice deep breaths. But when somebody is really anxious, they're breathing in their chest and they're like clenched, literally, that first pattern is what they look like. And it's like really narrow. They're literally narrowly and holding their breath. So the cool thing is that somebody gets to see that it's working. So I think that that's, one of the rewarding things. So if we use apps and we have it available in this way, I think that it's a concrete way to be able to say to people and our kids, like, this is working. Oh, I should have done a screenshot of this, but there's kid versions. So it's interesting. So there's race cars and there's jet skis that there's hot air balloons that can go up in the sky, and as long as you're doing the breathing in the positive direction and your green score is improving, that means the balloon stays in the air, or the jet ski stays up and go in the right way, or the race car doesn't like stop running the race. So kids are like, it's a challenge. It's a competitive thing for them to be able to control themselves. And how would you ever, like, I can't think of really any other things that they would be into that we would say to them, let's work on you controlling your emotions, right? They'd be like, I'm never talking to mom again. She doesn't get it. So in this way, they're actually rewarded and their scores improve by showing that they can control their breath, which you can't be unfocused, hyperactive, inattentive, and have good scores. So they are rewarded for getting really good control, and it's all them. And that's the coolest thing, because we end up, it's not medication, it's not like therapy, it's not talking or insight oriented, Not everybody likes the idea of therapy. Like, not everybody is going to be able to get on the couch and talk about problems and that works, So kind of like a physical but non-invasive approach could be super helpful. So this is, one version of what it could look like. Okay. Oh, actually, I'll show you the resources later. So I saved the best for my last piece before we talk about resources, because this is the thing that's like most unpopular, that hopefully you like me a little bit already, because you might hate me if this was the first thing I talked about. So it's not meant to be judgmental. I throw myself under the bus for this. This is exactly what we all could benefit from working on. But I sometimes say to people when they're parents that helping is not always helpful, So like trying to make sure that our kids have independent living skills and can do things on their own, those are actually the end goals. So what I want people to do is kind of rethink, like turn it upside down and just rethink, what does helping our kids really look like? Doing for them is the opposite of that, right? Like if we just do everything for them, they won't be able to pick out their clothes. They might be living in your basement forever, right? And that is not our goal, right? Don't want that. So for them to feel like confident to go in the world and to do things and be able to be confident doing that, and then like later leaving for college and moving out, all those things, it really starts all day long, really, with what we do at home, because it could be little opportunities hiding in plain sight for helping them learn to do stuff without doing for them. So sometimes we call it over-helping. I say it's almost like, I'm describing myself though. It's like a pathological need to help. I'm describing myself though. So sometimes if you really want to solve a problem and that's the mode your default is, right? A lot of parents have that default. We might not have had kids if we weren't oriented that way. But we want to help the tiny humans survive, right? Like we want to do something for them. So it makes us do things for them and overhelp or do for them. And so we want to just see and like take a moment and even think to yourself, is there anything that your kids maybe no longer need you to do? You know, sometimes I've had like my daughter at a play date or something, and they're like, oh, she ate this, or when she was younger, like she dressed herself. It didn't matter that I wasn't there to like bring her to the bathroom and stuff. And I was like, oh, I don't need to do that anymore. I didn't even realize that. There's always that stuff that's like the next level that they are getting to. And when we step back a little bit, they actually are rising to the occasion and doing it and being able to practice. So at a play date, if the other mother doesn't know that my kid will say no to every piece of food you offer to them, they might just actually offer the food and she says yes. I didn't know it wasn't just still the same, that it's always been this way, so I don't bother offering. You know, we don't sometimes know, so we guess that they're not able to do something yet. So that's why we end up doing these like support roles all the time. And so if they don't get a chance to practice problem solving, the end result, or like, as I can't tell you, like, you know, the term failure to launch, that's hard, right? Like it's usually somebody leaves for college and they bounce right out. And that's usually where we start to see that that's not just age appropriate having difficulty, but they really have not learned the independent living skills usually. And so they get overwhelmed by like, well, nobody told me when to go to the cafeteria and it closed. So I didn't eat dinner. Like the stories you hear with college are really interesting. You know, the things you wouldn't think you had to say, but if they can't do their laundry and they can't make a meal because the cafeteria closed and they're hungry till tomorrow, or they're using up the emergency card you gave them, right? Like they are not able to just like use strategies because they never had to. They didn't practice it. So I think this happens a lot. I have so many adolescent, because I worked in an adolescent practice for a long time. And we had a kitchen, and we had one of the adolescents put dish soap, like, you know, like Palmolive dish soap in the dishwasher. Oh, the bubbles, and like poured out of it. And I was like, oh my God, I never would have even thought I had to say, use this detergent over here. Like, but they've never done stuff like that. So, and then, you know, there's countless stories like this, but like somebody, you know, struggling when they're trying to get their apartment for the first time and living on their own. I mean, there's like launching adults, young adults, that have to call home and say, the light in the refrigerator turned off. I don't know what to do. That's a real story. Like so it's so much like all around us that we don't realize are awesome opportunities to be like, I'm fixing something, so I'm going to let you see how I fix it. And so if we jump in and we overhelp, we kind of like rob them of those opportunities. And there's always a chance, no matter how old, because I know right now, everybody's like, oh my God, I have a teenager. I have not done any of this. What am I going to do? Now they're like going to be stuck. And it doesn't matter, like any moment, there can be, think about all the problem solving steps and executive functioning that it took to even get here today for you, right? Like as adults, we had to navigate a bunch of stuff that went wrong and all the stuff that, you know, they might melt down and just go home, you know? But so all the things that happen, we could talk about it and we could kind of like acknowledge that it's happening. So this is part of the encouraging independence. The best way that I always say to do that you could really help with this is narrating. So there's another fancy word for this, but like I just call it narrating. So when I'm doing something, I don't need to say out loud, like I'm taking this detergent and putting it in the dishwasher, but I literally would go out of my way to say, I'm going to use this, and then I'm going to use this setting because kids know that we talk to ourselves, right? So that's fine. So they're not even going to notice. So if you're saying like, oh God, the dishwasher is just not drying the stuff, I'm going to press the extra turbo button with the extra drying, like just saying it out loud, what you were doing and why you were doing it. That narrating can happen all day long with all the stuff you do that you don't realize you're masters of. Like you've mastered so many things that could be totally overwhelming to a kid because they haven't really ever stepped into the role to do it. So everything that you are still doing, just start by narrating what you are doing and how you're doing it. And it really will, like, our voices become their inner voice, right? Like they're going to say like, oh, I remember Mom had said that, right? Or Dad always said that this is what he had to do first, and it always frustrated him, you know? Like they'll remember that stuff. So we want to always be narrating what's happening. I think of all the different things of trying to like improve somebody's independent living skills or build them for the first time, I think narrating might be the best, single most, cheapest solution, easy to do, can be done no matter where you are. And even when you're like making an appointment, I think it's really helpful, depending on how old the kid is, they can hear any part of it, right? Like calling and making an appointment. Does anybody have teenagers and they don't know how to make an appointment, right? They really don't, and it melts them down. They're like, can you call and make my physical appointment because I can't get into classes on the campus until I get this done? What do I do? Like, they really are scared to death of the phone. The phone's actual purpose is to make phone calls. I always say that to them, and they're like, what? Like, really? It's like mind-blowing. So I'm like, yeah. So all those times that like I was calling and saying, okay, you need a dental appointment and all the things, where's your insurance card? At that adolescent practice, we did what was called college boot camp. And that's what we did. We like prepared them for what is life like when you have to do stuff yourself? Like, do you know you have insurance? Do you know you have this card? And you can take a picture, keep it in your phone so you don't ever lose it. And do you know what to do when you're sick? Do you know like how to get your prescription? That's like mind-blowing for kids too. They're like, oh, you have to really think ahead. Like, and think about all the kids. It's such an evil irony of the kids who have ADHD and have to get a new prescription every month. Who set up the system is really hurts them in so many ways. But as a precaution, that's the way they do it. And so they fall off the radar and they don't stay continuously on their medicines. So the more we could like say, oh, I set up my automatic refills, or I set up a reminder for myself for this. That's you narrating all the stuff you do that keeps like, that's going to keep the guardrails on them later so that they don't fall apart because there were too many things they didn't know how to do. So you'll have if you just even the rest of today, think about the things that you accomplish. If you were saying out loud, you would have taught them 10 things. I promise, try that. See what that's like. All right. So the last piece that I want to go through before then we're going to switch to questions. So when you get, it's going to be like a PDF that's uploaded to the site, and there's a bunch of links. And these are reminders of what things you could check out. So where it says younger kids, think about, I put specifically, if you wanted to, this is the monster I was talking about. So if you want to have younger kids kind of learn how to do some mindfulness and breathing and even like anger management, it's a little bit of like the emotion regulation of this. This is an example of one of those tools. So there's categories of them. So it's kind of arbitrary that this was one that I picked, but I did use this one with my daughter years ago. And then, another mindfulness thing is sort of like, the one that I never heard the end of, my sleep story. So the kids version of it is something like the Dreamy Kid. So these apps also change all the time. It's like a huge business to make apps. So if you type in the category of like children sleep app, like children sleep, you'll get a ton of different ones. And then, I try to highlight ones that are free. But trying to get them to work on self-regulation, that's the kind of first tool. And the second tool is like the basic needs of like making sure that they can get good night's sleep. And that like lays the the groundwork. and being introduced to things like visualization and how to like calm their bodies. All the apps that do that for kids are so much better than us doing it because they don't want to listen to us instructing it. It has to be this separate thing. So they listen to computers and phones. They just don't want to listen to us instructing it. So luckily we have these kinds of things. So these are like categories of them. And then this is so tiny, I couldn't even read it. It says kids yoga deck. So kids don't like to sit still, right? So think about how when you introduce something, you have to know your audience, right? Like kids are not going to want to just like, you know, peacefully sit there quietly, especially if you have like a mover and a shaker kind of kid, right? So a lot of the apps are going to help kids be able to like have some gentle movement. Even like Tai Chi apps are really good for that, or even putting your kid into Tai Chi. It's like slow, gentle movements, and it's very mindful and calming, and shows them they're in control of their body again. So these are examples. That one happened to be not free. I don't know why. And then the next one is about breathing. So these are younger ones, okay? And then when you get to older kids, they can do the apps that the adults do, but there's also some stuff that's helpful to, again, they don't want to listen to us, but self-guided workbooks. So I would not say a word. I would get a workbook, leave it on the kitchen table, walk away. Don't describe it. Just let them find it. Not your idea. They just discovered it. That's all. And these are things that like, they absolutely come straight from kids. Like it's their voice. It is not an adult instructing them in these books. It really has like language in it that I've vetted and I really like and recommend a lot. So these are things that if they find it and they hear a voice that sounds like one of their peers and not an adult, it comes across really nicely. So I think that's helpful. And again, like Amazon, if you go and you put in like anxiety workbook for teens, you're going to get a ton of stuff. And so I try to like vet a few things and things that over the years I've been giving out to people as suggestions, just so you don't have to like go to the wild, wild west of the internet and figure it out. That's what I say WWW is, Wild, Wild West. I don't know where I got that. So older kids, and most people have seen things like Calm, right? But so it has like visualizations. It has a sleep section. It has a lot of stuff that's free that you don't end up having to pay for anything to get the good stuff. And that's the sweet spot, you know, like because a lot of the good apps will become expensive. Like they'll be free and then they start to charge you. So I like the ones that have stuck around for years. They've proven themselves, like Calm has proven itself. They gave it away to teachers for free and therapists, like providers during COVID. So like, it's just like, they're pretty good. And then the second one is Stress Guide. This one has gone on and off of the market, and I can never understand like why, because it's not just fixing a glitch, but it happens to be the free, really good one. So I keep it. I literally have always kept it on my phone. I don't even know how many years, like, but it has biofeedback straight in your phone. And this is the mind-blowing thing I want to share with you. So you know we have a camera. Think about when we go to like the grocery store and we scan and it has a red light. You know, it's like boop, you know, okay. So in our phone, it's the same red light. So that means it can read your pulse. So these apps that have heart rate variability and biofeedback, that's what it's having you do. You're putting your finger on the camera, the primary camera, because there's too many cameras now, your finger on the primary camera, and it is reading your pulse with that red light camera. So it goes right into the app and can display that heart rate variability based on what it's reading of your pulse and whether you're calming down from using the breathing. So So you could check at any given time, and also Android. I'm like not an Android person, so I'm not sure if they might have a good one. But if you look at your App Store or Google Play Store, is that what it's called? Something like that for Android, and you put in biofeedback, you'll get what happens to be supported at the time and is around. So, but just know that apps do come and go. But the premise is there's always one that's on the market at the time. And the one that's called Stress Guide, I just always liked. Oh, and by the way, the one that I showed is the one I use, like therapists use in an office, but there's an at-home version of it, and it goes into your cell phone. It's like a little pulse monitor, and it goes into the connector of the phone. And then just know when you go through these slides that these are parent-led interventions that people can do from home. I think the reality is people can't find providers. They need to be able to do something to help their kids. And so self-guided resources is the next best thing. If you are on a waiting list for 6 months, right, you can possibly not get into a practice for such a long time. So when it comes to anxiety, there's some really good things. So like Camp Cope a Lot is one of them. And for parents, there's the SPACE program. Has anybody ever heard of that? It's at Yale because it's kind of local. And that teaches you about how to handle your child's anxiety. And so it's an intervention that even though it's to help your kid, it's helping you. You're the client. So you're learning how to respond to your child's anxiety so that it doesn't increase. And it's a lot of education for you. It's very, very helpful. Things I talked about, like how do you do reflective listening? How do you do co-regulation? These are, like I said, I teach at college and nobody has any attention span in college. So short video is what I have for these things, just to make sure that we have, something that you can get a quick resource. These are things that you could look at. But also, if you have the younger kids, so it has to be elementary school because it's like 3rd, 4th grade. In Connecticut, Gizmo is a curriculum. I don't know, the person who's a teacher, I don't know if they use Gizmo in the school system, but it was created, it's a dog. It's like a therapy dog, but it's an animated therapy dog character, and it has books surrounding it, a whole curriculum. And so parents can use it, school systems could use it, and it was created for free and right in Connecticut. Those are things for you. And then we're at questions. All right. That was good timing. All right. Yes. Question?
Yes, I'm wondering, I'm trying to find these biofeedback app because that was the only app that didn't have like logo.
Yeah. It's
and-
a K. I have no idea. Oh, I think it's Kimono is the name of the company. So it's a K.
K. Okay.
Mm-hmm. In a center of a circle. So it
Okay.
might not.
It's not on right now. Okay. I
Might be on
found Stress
Android.
Check, which was supposed to be for Android, but I found it here. Maybe
Yeah.
try that then. Sorry.
Yeah. I tried to put the one that happened to be free. So like there's Tory, but literally typing in the word biofeedback is going to get to the one that is supported and works right this second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Just want to pass that along.
Thank you for being here and doing this seminar. It's so helpful.
Thank you.
Just 2 quick questions. One is, what age do you think the narrating my everyday problem solving skills would be most effective for kiddos to really absorb that information? So like at what age should I start doing it so that I'm not just overwhelming them with noise? Right. My kiddo's 4. And then the second question is, which one's the race car app? You said that there was a race car one.
Yes, the race car is part of M-Wave, which is part of the suite of apps that I showed you that was the screenshots I showed you. So where it says M-Wave right there, biofeedback, they have a whole section where they have the race cars and the hot air balloons and jet skis and stuff. And so how young is too young? Okay, so you don't want to be just like, peanuts, wah, 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 wah in the background. So I think that as soon as there's like receptive language, so they're not verbal explaining a lot of what they know when they're 4. They're developing their language. They know a lot more, can understand a lot more than they can speak and explain that they know. So 4 is good. Younger, no. You might be noise. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Going back to number 5, what strategies have you seen working for setting media boundaries?
Media in terms of like
On your
social media.
7 steps, step number 5, you had a slide and you're saying setting media boundaries.
What age group, by the way?
10 and 11.
Okay. So honestly, there is Disney by Circle. I always hate to talk about things that cost something, but it is one of the ways that you can go to the source of your internet in the house and set limits for all the many devices that are in your house. Because if you had to go to every single device and say, look, we don't want you to be on for more than 2, 3, 4 hours a day, like weekend maybe, longer. So the recommendation, under 2, no screen time. There's no potential benefit whatsoever under 2. And then when kids get around like 6 years old, they'll get alienated actually, and it's socially bad that they can't participate in conversation with other, kids. Like, don't you watch that show? Like, what's wrong with you? So they need that to be able to participate. But still 2 hours a day is the standard recommendation. And being able to get older kids restricted and not have a constant battle, it really ends up being something that is either like your internet provider where you can like pause devices if you have to. But the Circle by Disney is this like Wi-Fi connector that goes right to your router in your house. And it allows you to set the limits so that if they borrow a friend's phone or like they have some laptop in their room you didn't know about, whatever tries to enter the Wi-Fi is going to get those same limits. So you don't have to talk about it every day. I always think like try to keep the conflict out of it so that it's just set and done. And then as people get older, as kids get older, until kids are maybe 12, it's normal. Kids won't tell you this. They'll be like, everybody has their phone all night. But until like 12, it's really appropriate to have them turn their phone in at like 9 o'clock at night, before going to bed, not have it in their room. And then after that is when they get into that older age and you have to start really restricting the entire Wi-Fi of those devices. Identify which devices they even have, right? So that is a way to get around not having to go to every single device. But is there any other like social media or internet thing you were thinking about?
No, you had the example, you were talking about constantly being bombarded by news. And in that case, it would be within their hours of being able to use it. But how do you talk to your kids in a way that actually works and they hear it, where you tell them, stop the scroll of doom, right? So what are the things that you hear other parents telling their kids that works for them?
I think people are using the wait until 8 curriculum, which is like the social media contract with your kid, that they wait until 8 to have 8th grade, not 8 years old, sorry, 8th grade, to have a phone and be able to add apps. Like right now, we really don't want them to have things like Snapchat and Instagram. There's so much bad stuff that happens. And our kids are prey for people trying to indoctrinate them and get them to buy drugs. And nobody I know of our age, like probably never would have imagined that's actually how people are getting kids to be introduced to drugs is through those apps. Never would have known that. But there's a lot that's stuff that we wouldn't know, and we couldn't even really know if we looked at their phone and what they were texting each other, because there's little icons that they use short-term codes for. So you don't want to have to figure that out. You want to say everybody's waiting till 8. So a lot of people, like, the family friends try to normalize it by like, look, this is what our neighborhood, this is what our school. Try to get, like, I'm on the PTA in our in Newtown, and I think it should be an initiative with PTAs, like try to get the majority of parents on the same page so that they don't have to face going to school and somebody else has different rules. And I think that there could be a lot of like educational talks, maybe through the PTAs too, that tell parents about how it's not just that we don't want them to be cool and have Instagram and stuff. It's actually because it's predatory. And we don't want somebody talking to them or offering something to them, or on a Discord chat. Oh my God, I can't even think of an age that a Discord chat is appropriate, honestly, because there's so much coming through Discord. There's some that are less censored than others, and Discord's a huge culprit. Discord, when your kids are playing video games and they're on headsets, they're often on a Discord chat, a voice chat, where they're able to talk to the other players that are in the game at the same time, because they're not your friends. So you're not calling them on a cell phone. You're actually like playing with random. That's the danger of it, is the random people. So Discord is like a thing that everybody can sign into and be able to like all be in the game, not exchange phone numbers to call each other and stuff. So those are the things that, like, we can't even anticipate all the dangers of like how people are offering drugs to our kids, and those at least are known. So they're a moving target. It's like whack-a-mole, right? Like it's happening where it used to happen through Snapchat. Like that was all I ever heard about was Snapchat is, people were, soliciting kids and saying like, I have something, and offering them drugs. And then it's the other app, and now it's Instagram and TikTok. It doesn't matter. It moves around. So if we can wait, the whole idea about like wait until 8 is like, let them be a little less impulsive, like not that they're not still impulsive at 8th grade, but try to like let them be have a little bit better judgment and be able to hold themselves back a little bit more by the time that they have a phone that's 24-hour access to God knows what. And I have to say, like, as much as it sounds like, a restriction, I can't believe that it's out of the mouth of babes that you hear things from kids, but I've had kids that said that they were still traumatized by the things that were unsolicited sent to them as pictures. And so just having a phone that allows texting, right, is something where they can be just given a picture of something. Not that they asked for it. It's the term is grooming, like grooming of like sexual predators, but it happens with drugs as well, where if you send a picture and you don't immediately shut down that conversation, they're like, I could go further. Now I'm going to ask for this. Now I'm going to ask to meet up with you. Now I'm going to offer you drugs. Like it escalates because they're unsolicited getting these texts from people. And that's like the outside strangers, like that we have to worry about, stranger danger. But then the other stuff is literally just, kids develop at different times and they get exposed to different things. And so there could be somebody who likes somebody else and they send them a risque picture, and now it's on their phone and they're getting into trouble for it. And so it might not have ever been your kid who started this whole thing, but it could cause a lot of problems. Schools, I don't know about your district, but in our parent handbook, it doesn't matter that something happens off campus, like outside of school. People have been expelled from my kid's school from from just text exchanges that were inappropriate. Yeah. Oh, sure.
Hi. Just while we're on the topic of the phones, I'm struggling a little bit with the idea of giving kids apps as like resources to manage their anxiety when we're telling them to kind of stay off of their phones and to cut down on the screen time and to talk more, but yet we're providing all of these apps.
Yeah.
Like I'm just kind of like a contradiction.
I totally get that. It can feel like that. Yes, absolutely. I think it's sort of like, I don't know why this analogy comes to mind, but AI, so AI is something that we can't tell them, or the internet, we can't tell them don't use it, but we tell them like responsible use of it, because we know that's going to be like a necessary part of society, and it's going to be something that you need to know how to manage. So if they're going to use technology, helping them understand a phone is actually for phone calls. Like giving them the proper use of something and telling them like these are the boundaries of like what a phone should be used for, bring positive stuff to you, not messages from friends that's there's drama being kicked up in these group chats all the time. And like, like the phone becomes this source of like angst, or, things being sent to them that are inappropriate. So letting them see the appropriate use of it. And I think, it's always like such a parent decision, like whether they want to just be like, it's easier to say just no. And that's a perfectly valid answer. You can just say no. But if you are going to let them have phones at all, I think we have to say to them, these are the appropriate ways that you could be using it, and use it in a healthy way. So I think I was calling it positive digital apps, something like that.
Okay, thanks. And then just one other question. At the beginning of the presentation, you had like a pyramid, and it was talking about sitting with your child and
Yes.
kind of like being there. So
Mhm.
demonstrating breathing. How can you I'm just wondering if there's more tools to actually get the child, speaking of like older children, to actually sit down. Because a lot of times like anxiety is maybe, pacing or like, kind of freaking out a little bit. And it's even hard to get to that first level of like you said, not to say calm down, but
Yeah.
sometimes when they're not calm, it's,
Yeah.
your reaction is to say calm down. So if there's like any other tools to actually get them to calm down and sit with you without saying it.
Right, exactly. So I think when somebody is showing you that they like to get the energy out by like pacing and walking and stuff, that you go with it. Like let them set the pace that, they're showing you what they need without saying it. So saying, let's go for a walk right now. Let's just go, and walk around the neighborhood, because that's their style. They're kind of telling you without being able to use the words that that's what they need. And as long as you're not like revving them up by like making them run, because that's just going to bring up their heart rate. It's going to bring up like, but gentle, like walk around town to walk around the neighborhood together. As long as you're not amping them up by like walking too briskly, it still can be calming. That would be what I think.
Thank you. This is just something, it's a personal experience happened to me years ago, and I think it's sort of connected to this. It was the late 80s. I was on a train from Stamford into New York City, and it was the night before Thanksgiving, packed train. Something happened on the tracks ahead of the train, it was a fire or something. We were stuck on that 40-minute train ride for 4 hours. And what happened for me is I was sitting there, I had just picked up knitting. I was just starting to learn how to knit. So I just honestly sailed through those 4 hours.
Wow.
People around me were losing it,
Yeah.
completely losing it.
Yeah.
And I would not have remembered that so much if it wasn't so extreme. And you hear people now talk about, oh yeah, knitting, it's so meditative, it's helpful. It is. But what I would say is just the connection to any kind of hand movement, creative movement with your hand, whether it's painting,
Coloring.
whatever we can give for kids to understand, it is so helpful. I don't get on any mass transit without any sort of a knitting project.
I can see why now. That's perfect. 100%, I totally agree with that. And coloring is one of the kind of meditative things that you're alluding to also. And I recommend that universally for kids and adults. In my graduate school office suite, we have a giant coloring page on the wall because they're stressed out grad students and they come in between classes and they color on the wall, this like big like mandala kind of thing with the markers, and it helps them zone out in a positive way, and it's meditative. It really is very therapeutic. So I think that's super helpful. Yeah, I agree. Oh, yes.
So what in your research field have like found out the like top 3 root causes for the modern day anxiety, including the parents?
Causes?
Yeah, in addition to technology per se, but what was in the technology? What was the more fundamental root causes causing all this? And are there any way to effectively tackle them?
So specifically about technology?
Not
Or just all?
Just say, oh, because technology, oh, because of the pandemic, oh, because this was, or there's something more fundamental that I've overlooked.
That early slide that I had, that kind of has like a list of the most common culprits. I think the sheer number and the accumulation of so many things simultaneously changing in our society, like fundamentally, like everything really has all inundated people. That's a big difference. That makes it seem like we're a different generation right now that we're raising than before. So the cause is the fact that there's so much and coming from, really every direction, and there's no capacity to like turn it off because of social media. Like, your phone is like always buzzing. Like there's no way to kind of like have breaks from it, and it's overstimulating.
Sure, because I remember you listed the political division and so on, and also peer pressure. But beneath all this, there was something more fundamental that we are losing sight of, because we are not sure what is the right thing we should do, what is the right belief to take on. So otherwise this game, they were going to be overwhelming, information overload or inundating those messages come in because we were selling some ideas which was wrong, and we don't have the right ideas to defend ourselves against. So I was thinking,
do you have any ideas? What it might be? I think the person behind you has an idea.
Philosophy in Europe and American. Have there any been philosophy at all talking about helping the kids to establish some more fundamental, either be philosophical or just more, if non-philosophical, some more traditional values that can help them build up this definition of meaning or value? Then they can be better positioned to defend this kind of inundation of other people's value, right?
Yeah, I do. I agree that it's like a larger issue, and that's why I think I used the word culture a couple times, because I think of it as like a whole larger society difference that we're experiencing that is contributing to it. I don't think there's like a single trigger that kind of explains why this is different now, but that's why I chalk it up to like multiple things coming from multiple directions all the time. And what we do know about like the brain is that these are, stresses, chronic stresses change the brain. So when things are happening, especially younger, when your brain is not as protected, that's why we don't want people to drink until they're older. Their brain is more like done with all of the building it needs to do. That is not solidly in place till about 25. So we don't want them, in a perfect world, we would not want them inundated with stresses until their brain was capable of staving it off and being okay. So I think that's part of what's different about them too, is that this is something that's affecting their entire development and even their brain. This, stress does change things. It's like a form of a chronic daily stressor and trauma. I think the person behind you had an idea to maybe answer, because we're giving our best guesses about what this could be.
I was actually thinking of bringing up the other half of or the other side of the coin in the Anxious Generation book. He talks about the lack, I think, of free play and risky play and just that downtime with other people face to face in the analog childhood. And I feel like that's, I mean, I have a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I'm struggling to get them in free play. Everybody is in structured, adult-led, dance class and taekwondo, and those are great. But it's not just playing with your friends and doing dress up and having, full day play dates like I did in the 80s. And I think that is a huge part of it. I think that's how your brain relaxes and restructures, is my understanding. And I'm not sure how to get back to that. And I guess I just wanted to mention that as a possibility to answer his question, and also ask your thoughts on just play and getting back to the analog childhood. It's a huge, huge issue. That's why I wasn't sure I should bring it up. But
I love that term. I guess I had an analog childhood. I didn't even realize when I thought about that. So I do think that like the lack of open play is an issue. I think that's why when we're thinking about this, that might be why some parents pick things like Montessori schools, because it's a lot of different structure, not like militant. They're allowed to be free range kind of kids, and kids primarily learn through play and social interactions. And if they're sitting like soldiers in little desks all day, they don't get that. So I think there's some things missing maybe from each kind of educational model, but something to do is to think about other educational settings. And because we don't have the kind of neighborhoods where like everybody's out riding their bike until it gets dark, like it wouldn't be kind of safe to do that around here, there's no places for that. So, but finding other parents that are like-minded too. So like joining some parent groups, like maybe even SPED NET might be part of, like the host of this series might be finding other parents that are like-minded and struggling with the same stuff. And then, so your child's in preschool, right? So thinking about different models for that preschool, definitely. And then that's how you meet other parents. Like this is how I find friends, is through my kid. So, because as adults, how do you meet friends? But they're more likely to be like-minded if they chose that daycare center, that preschool, because it's more open model. So that might be a way to connect, I think. Yeah. And then
just to jump on that, I think the thing that is missing, or the thing that contributes to this, is loneliness, right? And it's such an important part, just to piggyback on what you all are saying about our community, right? And having that support system around us to support us in the things that we all go through in a lifetime, but for some reason choose never to speak about. And so I think that contributes to the anxiety and things like that. So just really creating that community for yourself and for your children to really be a part of, and to have that model as they grow older so that they can then do that for themselves as they become adults.
I totally agree. While we were moving the microphone, Facebook groups for parents tend to be the only place where we're honest. And we're like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened again. School is doing this to me. Like, we just let it all loose, right? And we get the camaraderie and the support from people. If that could be in person, that would be so great. But that seems to be like the only little silo where we get some relief from knowing other parents are all going through the same thing. So at least if you have that, I think it's helpful to have a parent group online.
I have hesitated to bring up a topic because what you had planned is so comprehensive and excellent. Thank you. But
Yeah.
this is highly sensitive persons. It's not a syndrome, it's not a disorder. It's that there are children who from prenatal time
Mhm.
have sensitivities above and beyond those of the average person or other people. 20% of the population, both males and females, boys and girls, can have a highly sensitive nature. It
Like their
means-
nervous system, kind of like
it-
wired from birth.
Well, and it means that this is the child who at the age of 2 or 3 or 4 stands back and watches to gather a sense of what's going on. This is a child who is overwhelmed by loudness. This is not autism. This is not on the spectrum. This is just that they are highly sensitive. Something that is not culturally bound either. In other words, it's universal.
Yes.
So it has to do with children who have these perceptions. They're normal for these children, for 20% of the population.
It's
I'm
huge.
just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Possibly topic for another presentation.
Absolutely. It's funny, that's one of the books I took out because I wasn't thinking about if it was helpful, but like The Out of Sync Child is a book that I always recommend to people who have kids that have like sensory sensitivities, because it's trying to help them regulate their bodies, which, you know, goes to what we've been talking about too. Like if people could regulate how their bodies feel, then they can engage and not have to stand back and see what's going on around them. They wouldn't be overwhelmed by all the like stimuli coming at them. It wouldn't feel like dangers coming at them. But that's one of the things that we talk about, like sensory integration, and it doesn't have to be somebody who's on the spectrum at all. There's a lot of people, but I do think about it from like a biological perspective, like sensory, like a very sensitive nervous system. And when you do history, because I'm just so used to doing histories with people and saying like, okay, how far back did you notice stuff? And it really is from birth, like not being able to soothe themselves when they were crying, like in the crib, like all the way back to then. That sensory sensitivity stuff is why we need like a trauma-informed approach with the self-regulation and not bombard them with questions and stuff. And oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I can't do this anymore.
Right. So one of my favorite books right now that I'm not done reading, but it's called The Canary Code. And I always kind of say in my department at work, I'm the canary. I notice everything before anybody else does because I'm sensitive. So I notice like people are not being nice to each other. And, you know, like, so people who have sensitivities growing up, they later are in the workplace, right? And sometimes can't be successful in some workplaces because of this. So, so the term for the adults, they started to call that they identify yourself as like a canary, like the canaries that went into the coal mines, and they were the ones they were the first carbon monoxide detectors. It told the miners whether it was safe to breathe the air, and so the canaries, you know, died basically. Like, they did revive them. They had a little. Oh, it's so funny. Anyway, but literally they would put the canaries into the mines to tell the miners, like, can you go into this mine and not die from the lack of oxygen? And because they breathe so fast, they notice and they're sensitive to everything. So they're the way we find out if something's dangerous. And a person who's like a canary on the inside, they notice stuff before anybody else that like, people aren't, you know, being kind or sensitive to, like, they're not being inclusive, and they don't realize that some people might not be able to participate in an activity you came up with. Like, it's part of why we have to have such like equity and inclusion in workplaces to acknowledge people like that. Yes, empaths too. Yeah, exactly. They feel it. Oh, sorry.
Hi, thanks. This has been great. Thank you so much. So beyond, I just I have a question about the current ideas about therapy. I have a teenager with lots of issues and severe social anxiety and general anxiety, has been recently diagnosed, depression, ADHD, and a little spectrum-ish And is CBT still considered sort of the gold standard plus medication?
For anxiety? Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's not intuitive. So it's actually totally counterintuitive. So I always want to point out to parents, because it's not at all what your instincts would be. But the gold standard for treating anxiety is actually exposure to the thing that you're worried about or scared of or have a phobia about. So that's why it's so important to not like jump in and problem solve and fix problems, because then they never get the exposure to it. So when people are anxious, they're anxious for good reasons, in their brain is saying there's good reasons to think there's a danger, but they have to be exposed to it. And CBT has all the kind of concrete tools to do exposure therapy in like a structured way. And so it still remains one of the best tools for that. We don't have a great local resource. I end up telling people to go to the Hartford Center. It's called the Hartford Center for Anxiety, and they specialize in children and adolescents with anxiety, because not everybody's taught this. Like I actually train therapists in my graduate program. Not everybody ever gets training how to do that. It's because it's a specialty within CBT. But yeah, that's definitely the direction to go. Yeah. Yes. What was the first word?
Hi. It's about kids being independent and teaching them.
Yeah.
Finding that balance between them having that busy lifestyle with school and going home on a bus and all the activities we've been talking about, and then also being independent of doing some housework or getting your project ready. I feel sometimes it's so much on their plate. I don't know what age is good to keep adding things on their plate.
Because it feels like it might be overwhelming.
Like, get to the point like it's too much as well. Like,
right.
That we're expecting from them.
That's an important point. I think that when you're trying to help a kid master something, working on like one thing at a time is good. The dishwasher. Can you do the dishwasher without flooding the house? One skill at a time is a way to make sure that you don't overwhelm. And it's slow and steady wins the race, because if you are always working on something and like letting them take a little more of the lead on it, then they're one more thing that they know how to do. And then the next month they have another thing they've mastered. And as long as you keep like doing one step at a time, you're still making really good progress. Like narrating. It's actually more like letting them observe you do it, and then they have, I always use the computer as an example of this. So kids get to a certain age where they're supposed to be emailing their teachers, and we're not supposed to be doing it for them. So I always am guiding parents about going to the computer and letting them sit next to you. So this is like, let them see it first, then do it independently. Don't just like throw them in the deep end, right? So they sit next to you and they see your thought process, like why, what's the goal of this email? Like writing out the email, narrating what you're thinking, and then you sit next to them and they have their hands on the laptop and they're typing. And as they get stuck, you can give suggestions. And then when they don't have any questions left for you, you disappear. And then they're independently doing that. So that's like the metaphor for any other activity. Like let them watch you do the dishwasher. Let you watch you clean or fix something in the house. Rather than like put them in charge of it right from the beginning. Sure. Good. Yeah. I think that was good. Yeah. All right. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much.